Last year, we did my type 1, and we used the Myers-Briggs Enneagram. Anybody familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality type? This year, we're going through, and we're using the Enneagram. So basically, there's 9 different personalities using the Enneagram. So we've been talking about each one of those personalities. Today, we continue, and we talk about type 9. But before we do, somebody sent me a picture, and I think I have a slide for it. And I thought this was cute, so I wanted to share this. It says, you should sit in nature for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're busy, then you should sit for at least an hour. Aw, isn't that cute? So somebody sent that to me, I think because last time I was up here, I talked about love for nature. Is there anyone else here that loves nature? Anybody? Okay, great. So you can relate to this. I think there's a lot of reasons why our culture is spiritually hungry and starving, but I think one of them is the fact that we are so disconnected from the rhythms of nature. When I can stay up till 2 in the morning and I'm hungry and I want strawberries and I can go 20 minutes later, get strawberries, come home and just gorge out, there's something a little odd. I'm disconnected from the rhythms of life. Does that make sense? Where previous generations were much more in touch and just connected with the seasons, the rhythms of life. So people that lived previously were much more able to see the interconnectedness of everything. And so that kind of jumps us in what we're going to talk about today, which is type 9. Type 9s are fascinating, I think. They're actually really inspiring. The more I learned about type 9, the more I was kind of inspired and drawn. Type 9, more than any other type, they can see the interconnectedness of all things. And so they have a big picture. They see the way things fit together, the way the world works. So type 9s is also called the peacemaker. This is a personality that's, these types of people are easygoing, receptive, reassuring, trusting, and stable type people. So as we're going through each type, we've been giving basic descriptions, basic fear, desire, and struggles. So the type 9, which if you haven't done already, you can take the personality test online. If you go to onechurch.com, we have a link and you can take the personality test to kind of find out more about your personality, which one you might resonate with. But the basic fear of the type 9 personality is of loss or separation. The basic desire, of course, is kind of the opposite of that, to have inner stability or peace of mind. Basic struggle of type 9 is laziness or lethargy. I'm going to say a little bit more of this because, of course, all of these, every time we talk about a basic struggle, it's like up and in your face. I don't think type 9s are necessarily lazy. I think there is a struggle sometimes to not act in fear of conflict. Does that make sense? So not as they're lazy themselves, but in stepping out, in doing, they realize that conflict may arise. And so it'll be a tendency for 9s to sit back. Say, I don't want to enter there because I'd rather not have conflict. Some key motivations for 9s, they want to create harmony in their environment and to avoid conflicts and tensions. They like to preserve the things that are working well, preserve them the way that they are. Keep them going. It's okay. It's peaceful. Let's leave it alone. Let's not try to mess with it. And they tend to resist or stay away from whatever would upset them, disturb them, any kind of conflict. Is this kind of making sense a little bit? So some examples. We've been sharing healthy, average, and unhealthy types. Or levels, I guess, within each personality. So I think we have a slide for that. I might have actually, yep, there we go. So the healthy type. So 9s, when they are healthy, they're very stoic in their nature. They tend to have like a quiet strength. They put others at ease. They're very skilled, like a skilled mediator. They're very, again, good at seeing the whole picture. So they're very good at seeing 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 different sides and kind of holding a mediating space in between. They are also unpretentious. So this is great. I mean, a type 9 personality is a really interesting, insightful, inspiring person. Even the average type 9 is still very inspiring. They're monkish, they're nice, easygoing, peaceful, agreeable, well-grounded individuals. Again, I think this has to do with their ability to see the interconnectedness of all things. So even at average, a 9 is a very unique and interesting person. So of course, we have to talk a little bit about the unhealthy aspects. So the unhealthy aspects of the type 9, again, they tend to be lazy. And I think when I say that, I think passive is almost a better word. So the laziness isn't out of, I just want to sit here and do nothing, but it's out of, I don't want to engage in things. So they tend to be a little bit more passive at times and sitting back and allowing things to happen or unfold. Undeveloped at times, which we all are in our unhealthy aspects. So that's not unique to the 9. Lost, spacey, or overly compliant. Does this give you a little bit of a feel for a type 9? Again, as we study the Enneagram, there's 9 different personalities. Each of us have all 9 within us. So there's a part of the 9 within all of us. So whether we are a 9 or not, there's things I hope that we can relate to here. But you will predominantly be drawn to 1. That's your core type. So 9s tend to be very open and optimistic. They have a great view of life, and they have believe that humans have an innate capacity for goodness. So they're very optimistic in their view, which we need more of that for sure. I mean, people who are very pessimistic are not really fun to hang around with. So they'll always see sort of the glass or the bottle is half full. Some well-known 9s. I won't have a slide for this, but I'm just going to read it, and hopefully it'll help our imaginations kind of grasp a little bit more of the type 9. So some well-known 9s. Queen Elizabeth II, Norman Rockwell. So I think like Norman Rockwell paintings, when you think of beauty and captivating that and peace, and I think that's a good image for a type 9 personality. Abraham Lincoln, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Colin Powell. So you can see that even though there is a tendency to be lazy or passive, type 9s aren't necessarily that. I mean, you have Abraham Lincoln, who went out and stepped in the midst of 2 extreme sides, bringing together freedom from slavery, right? And so I don't consider 9s lazy. I just consider that they tend to be more passive, but when they have a cause that they believe in, they're very good at standing in the middle and fighting for that cause. Walt Disney is another one, Janet Jackson, Ron Howard, Audrey Hepburn, Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, Whoopi Goldberg, Sandra Bullock, Clint Eastwood. So I put this in here, and I'm thinking, like, there's no way he's a type 9. Like, who thought of that? And, of course, my image is all the characters he plays in the movies, right? Which is probably not a type 9. I mean, he's the lone cowboy, pointing guns at people, the famous line, "Do you feel lucky?" That's what I think of when I think of Clint Eastwood. Although as a person, which I don't know, supposedly he is a type 9. So don't take the image that he gives on the screen as a type 9, just his personality. President Obama is very likely a type 9. The Dalai Lama and Nelson Mandela are also possibly type 9 people. So I hope my type is a type 2, so I don't like people to reject me. So I hope that you don't reject me if you're a type 9 when I say that you're lazy. So I keep reaching out and say, I hope you don't think that. But Nelson Mandela, I mean, is that a lazy person? No. So in their healthier forms, they're fighting for cause and bringing about peace, not just for themselves, but for everyone else around them. Again, the interconnectedness of all things. So as we talk about relationships, I try funneling a ton of information, and I was trying to, what could be helpful for a type 9? First, let me say this. Type 9s in relationships, they're easy to get along with. If you know a type 9, are a type 9, or have relationships with a type 9 that you know of, they're probably close friends. They're just naturally genuine, easy to get along with. They don't like conflict, so they're not going to be super opinionated or dominating, so they're easy to get along with, friendly, genuine. Plus, they have your best interest in mind many times. So here's just a few maybe tips that could help a type 9 in relationships. Learn to acknowledge and deal with hurtful or painful issues. Type 9s can have a tendency, almost like an ostrich, when conflict comes, to kind of bury their head in the sand and ignore it, which we all probably have done. I've done many times. And what happens when we bury something? It eventually surfaces later, right? And we can kind of keep trying to stuff it down eventually, but eventually it will surface again. Let me get my thoughts together here. Some helpful pointers for a type 9 would be just to learn to acknowledge those relationships. especially in your past, anything that's been hurtful in your past, and learn to walk through that. Learn to be more assertive. Again, this is not true of all type 9s, but on the unhealthier aspects, type 9s tend to be not as assertive. Healthier type 9s can totally take that assertive role and go with it and be that person. Type 9s are in, I didn't mention this, but type 9s, the Enneagram can be broken up into what's called the triad. So 3 groups of 3. If you remember, 8, 9, and 1 are the body-centered. So they're the instinctual centered. So both 8, 9s, and 1s have a strong need and are very independent, autonomous people. Does that make sense? And so it's important for 9s to not find their identity wrapped up in somebody else, but to be their own individual person. The last thing, of course, is maintain your independence. Some unhealthy forms of type 9s can repress themselves so much that they barely function as an individual or don't know who they are. So aspects of that would be to engage in your feelings, your emotions. Who am I as a person? It's easy probably for 9s to engage in other people, like, oh, you like, Mexican food. That sounds good. You like Chinese. That sounds good. And you begin to develop your identity in that. But 9s have a strong desire and need in healthy forms to be independent, to be their individual self. Hopefully that makes sense. So in trying to tie up all of this, I have a short video that we've kind of been going through each type, and it'll explain the 9 from a different perspective. So let's go ahead and watch that video now. Awesome. So moving on to careers. Careers that 9s are drawn to are just almost naturally gifted in, of course, is therapy, counseling, social work. Those 3 give a good reflection of what comes natural to a 9. Again, because they're good peacemakers, right? They're good at seeing the whole picture. The gift for 9s, they're naturally good at accepting others without prejudice. No judgment. Usually you do not feel judgment around a 9. You feel accepted and you feel loved for who you are, which is amazing. We could use more people like that, right? Other work, salesperson, retail clerk, teaching, and or a professor. I think that can also come into play because as a teacher, you're juggling many different people, many different perspectives, right, and trying to navigate that. Animal trainer or veterinarian, musician, musical instructor. So 9s almost universally love music. So music is something you can think of that brings peace for the most part. I mean, there's some like heavy metal, rock and music that it does bring peace to some people, but by and large, music, when we think of music, we think of peace, relaxation, right? Calmness. Other careers, writing, clothing designer, or artist. So jobs that may be difficult for a 9, anything that requires being super aggressive on a consistent basis, or where you have to be antagonistic, meaning like an attorney or a law enforcement officer would be really hard for a 9. You got to be up in somebody's face. You got to, or a job where you have to say no to a lot of people, or fire a lot of people, where there's a lot of conflict. So if you're a 9 and you're experiencing frustration at work, it could very well just be that there's conflict. And you probably already know that if you're a 9, that you don't like conflict, and whenever there's conflict involved in your work, that you struggle through that. So let's talk a little bit about spiritual formation. We're going to kind of sit here for a moment. So our view is that we each engage God differently. We each understand God differently. And actually, if you take our personality, whatever personality you are, it also kind of acts like a lens in how you understand God. Not in an extreme way, but it influences how you understand God. So if you're a 9, you see the interconnectedness of all things much more naturally than others. So you might see God moving in places and in ways that other people don't always perceive. So some ways to grow spiritually for a 9. Understanding your value and worth. Number 2, realize you have more potential than you think. So 9s tend to idealize other people, and that's a great thing. But by doing that, not like they don't like themselves, but by idealizing other people, in a way, you're not putting yourself up as high and not realizing your own potential, your own value, your own worth. I hope this is making sense. Explore your past and walk through all of it. So again, if you see a theme between relationships and even spiritual formation, I think there is a theme there. It's learning about yourself, discovering yourself, walking through your past. And lastly, I put spiritual direction. Is there anybody here familiar with that term, spiritual direction? That they've heard that before? I hadn't. I grew up in the church and I had no idea what spiritual direction meant. So if you don't know, it's okay. You're not alone. This last December, I was in a place where I grew up in a certain kind of church, very conservative, and I grew away from that kind of church background. And I was a part of a church that was open, but very conservative in their expression, and very different than anything I had been raised in, if this makes sense. So I was trying to navigate this while going to seminary and learning all this information and developing as a person and trying to figure out, what does this all mean? And it came up several times in one of my classes, spiritual direction. So I looked into it. At the Franciscan Renewal Center, which is in Scottsdale. Anybody been there? It's beautiful. Right? You go out back, you just walk, and it's a beautiful garden. Anybody can go there anytime. If you want to get away and just pray walk, be out in nature, just have your time alone, it's a great place. But I called them because they have a spiritual direction group and somebody that oversees that. And so I told them about myself. I said, I'm looking for a spiritual director. They put me in touch with somebody. A spiritual director is basically somebody who walks alongside of you for however long. Usually you meet like once a month. And spiritual direction is misleading because it's not so much directing as it is guiding or being there. My spiritual director calls it holy listening. And what she does is often I'm confused, I'm frustrated, I'm not sure, I have so many questions. And what she does is like connect all of these dots and say, do you see, I think God's working here and here and here. And so in the midst of all the messiness and confusion, she brings clarity, where I'm just like, oh my goodness, you're so right. And so when I say spiritual direction, it might mean actually finding a spiritual director. But for a 9, and this is probably true for any of us, it could mean seeing a counselor or a therapist. And there's nothing wrong. Some of the healthiest, greatest people I know still see counselors and therapists on a semi-regular basis. So I kind of grew up with this, like if you went and saw a counselor, like something was wrong with you, and that's so not true. But basically, it could be a pastor, it could be somebody as simple as a friend. But what I'm getting at is it's really easy for me to say, oh, grow in your value and worth, realize your potential. Yeah, hopefully that's somewhat inspiring. But then tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to feel the same way, right? It's a struggle. And so part of that is journeying with someone else, a friend, someone you trust, who can consistently point out into you, you are valuable, you have more potential than you think, you have more worth than you realize, and who may even be able to point out areas that they have seen in your life. And that is helpful, isn't it? I think it's helpful for all of us. So a scripture verse that stands out when I think of a 9 is found in Romans 8, verses 38, one of my favorite ones. And we sang about God's love, which is just wonderful. And this reflects a lot of that. In Romans, it says, the Apostle Paul is speaking here, for I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. And if it doesn't matter what personality we are, but if we can live into that and experience that on a day in and day out basis, that would change us. And we're all growing in this, aren't we? Because there's days we don't feel God's love, and we don't feel it at all. Or there's people who express God's love very differently to us, and we're like, how can that be love? And so it can affect us. But I think as we grow in this, and this is true of all of our personalities, experiencing God's love on a regular basis, because the scripture says that God is love. If there was any definition, that would be it. God is love. We could just go home, live on that for the rest of our life, and walk into that. So healthy 9s can be the most content and pleasant people imaginable. They're genuine, extraordinarily receptive. They make people feel accepted as they are. So that kind of concludes nines. Nines are great people, right? Would you agree? Anybody know a nine? Raise your hand if you know a nine. Okay, so quite a lot of us probably know a nine. And if you don't, I'm sure if you took a little time, you probably could reflect and say you do know a nine. So instead of an overview of all the different types, I have a short humorous video, so take it lightly, of all the different types and how we each walk through life differently. So let's go ahead and watch that video real quick. So as we kind of conclude this series, we're kind of going to talk more a little bit about health and what it looks like. This is hard because there's 9 different types, and I can't go through each type. We've kind of done a little bit, but I can't go through each type and kind of describe each type individually. So think of it as like a horizontal line with 9 different types or 9 different points. There's also theorists who teach and explore the Enneagram model, suggest that there are actually 9 different levels of health, which in each type, which may be why, or part of the reason why you might be a certain type and know somebody else is a certain type, and yet you have vast differences. So we meet on Thursday nights with our one group, and we're studying the book that we're kind of going through for this series, the Enneagram, Unpacking the Enneagram from a Christian Perspective by Richard Rohr. And it was brought to our attention. We're talking about type 2. So I'm just going to share this because I'm a type 2. And somebody said that the unhealthy type 2s are often like a black hole. They're needy. They're constantly trying to get your attention. They're sucking the life out of you because they need to be loved and wanted, right? So that would be an unhealthy type 2. We've probably known people like that in our life, right? And on the healthier side, the same type is somebody who genuinely gives and gives out of an overflow and loves and loves and serves and nurtures. Okay, does that make sense a little bit? And so I put this on here to give us a little bit of a perspective of the different levels. So healthy, average, and unhealthy, and then there's 3 levels in between. So what I'm going to attempt to do is summarize this. As I was kind of looking into this, there was one word that stood out. And in fact, in some of them, they gave lists like this, and they had this word in each one of those levels. And it is the word ego. Anybody familiar with the word ego? It can be an abstract word. But basically, to summarize this as simply as I can, in unhealthier levels, whatever your personality type, your ego is in control. As you get healthier and you move up to the healthier levels, you are released, liberated from your ego. So I'm going to try to take this abstract understanding and trying to bring it down so we can understand it using a couple metaphors. So really what the question is, then there's 2 questions for us that I kind of want to explore. The first one is, what is the ego? And then the second one is, what does it mean for us as Christians? And so first, what is the ego? I'm a father. I have 2 little boys. They're ages 3 and ages 5. And so they are all boy. They're home now. It's summertime. Mom, who's sitting right over here, is always at school. So it's like a boy house. And we have a boy dog. So it's just a lot of testosterone pumping in that house. One of our favorite things to do is to fight. So I brought one of our children's favorite thing to do is to dress up into superhero costumes. And then we have like hardcore lightsaber wars, right? And so I brought with me one of my favorite costumes from one of my children. So if you could picture this, I'm wearing something like this, and then my kids are all wearing their own Darth Vader, Captain America, lightsabers. I mean, it's a duo to the death. The last one standing is the last one living, right? And so I love wearing this, and I only do it because my kids want me to. Has nothing to do with my inner childhood or the fact that I love Batman, or the fact that I love fighting. But anyways, when I'm wearing this, does it make me Batman? Yes. Sweet. I'm gone. All right? Even if I can say, like, I'm Batman. With a mix of, who's the new Batman? Ryan Reynolds? Isn't he the new Batman? Anybody know? Yeah? or George Clooney or Christian Bale, if I could do that and act like that, does that make me Batman? If I put this on and I run around in the middle of the night trying to rescue damsels in distress and fight violence, does that make me Batman? No, obviously. So the mask is not who I really am. Now, is my hair all messed up and funky? It still looks okay. Still there. The mask is not who I am. In the same way, the ego is not who you are. The ego is a false self. It's a self that we construct to allow others to see us in different lights. A lot of times it's based out of fear, insecurity, our need to feel superior, our need to be right. I'm trying to take an abstract term and make it so that we all can kind of grasp it a little bit more. So another way of understanding this would be to use religion. Just like each personality has different levels, health, average, and unhealth, religion across the board, I think, has healthy, average, and unhealthy expressions. So you probably would agree with me that you've all seen unhealthy expressions of religion, right? I mean, this isn't big news. But let me suggest that oftentimes that is expressed because people are living into their ego. Religion, by its nature, I think attempts to push us through our ego, but some people will use religion to feed their ego. And so religion can actually be used to create more barriers, to create more violence, to create more prejudice, racism, etc., right? And so we've actually talked about this at the student ministry here at One Church. Is religion good or bad? I mean, we can see unhealthy aspects all around. The problem is people identify unhealthy expressions as the religion. So, I mean, just easily, in a Christian church, we can look at our nation, predominantly a vast majority Christian, and it's easy for us to take in what we have seen, take the Muslim religion, and say Muslims are violent, and we want them out. But that, I think, is wrongly connecting an unhealthy expression of religion with that religion. Christianity is the same way. If we look at our own history, it's not all roses, right? Our religion has killed people because the people have believed differently. It's an unhealthy expression of religion. But I think at the healthiest forms, religion pushes us past our ego. So take Christianity. Jesus lived in the first century, right? And if we read the stories of Jesus, who are the people that Jesus had most conflict with? Religious leaders, right? Now, Pharisees get a bad rap, rightly so, because we read about them and it's almost all negative, but they weren't all that way. But the Pharisees that we learn about in a lot of the stories, they, I think, were an unhealthy expression of a religion living into their ego. Does that resonate? So it was people, not the religion. It was people taking a sense, I need to feel superior. I need to feel right. And anything that questions that, anything that pushes against that needs to be fought down, pushed down, fought against. So Jesus rose up and fought it and subversively moved against unhealthy forms of religion, and even moved outside of religion and engaged people outside of different religious backgrounds. So we've all seen unhealthy aspects of religion. It can boost and it can feed your ego. But I think it also can push us forward and move us past our ego. It's much more about the person than it is about the religion per se. All that to hopefully, does everybody get a little bit better of an idea of what ego is? That power structure within, we all have. So when we feel a battle within us and we're like, why am I acting this way? Why did I say that to that person? Like, I felt like inside of me I was just angry, and I felt a need to feel superior, to feel better, to feel right, to defend whatever it was, when in reality it's not helpful. And so you can see this tension. So within Christianity, I would call this spiritual formation. The problem with our modern world is that so many of us are going so fast, almost like a boat just skimming along the surface. I guarantee we've all felt that, where it's like life is just whizzing by, right? So we don't have time to sit and think and feel. So a quote from Richard Rohr that will help us. Talking about transformation, spiritual formation, he says, the path of descent is the path of transformation. Those aren't really exciting, inspiring words because it means that we go down deep into who we really are, almost like a giant cave or cavern that's dark. Scripture talks a lot about shining light, exposing darkness, going in down deep within us. Like, why am I fearful? Why do I have to make myself appear better than I really am? Why do I have to push against people, antagonize people? Why am I struggling with my pride? Going down deep and asking those questions is what spiritual formation has a lot to do about. Another way to express this, Parker Palmer, who is a Quaker, a writer, author, and an educator, he says spiritual formation is not about moving out and up, but about moving in and down. So, in unhealthier forms of religion, we tend to skate around the surface, and actually our egos are never transcended. We live into our egos, and we can actually use religion to boost our egos. Does that make sense? In healthier forms, when we take the time and we dig down deep and expose, becoming aware of our ego. And it's hard because it takes work, it takes time. I can't tell you what your ego is. I can't sit there and point it out to you. It's you personally. People can help you and move and journey through that with you, but no one else can sit there and point it out. And it's not something you just say, okay, I'm done, boom, I'm good. But it's through being liberated through our ego that we walk into health. So Jesus says in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. So using the Enneagram and everything we've been talking about, God's hope, God's dream, God's desire is for us to live into our health, to be fully healthy who you are, not who someone else is, not another personality type, but who you are, which takes time. It takes discovery. It's a journey, and it has a lot to do with being liberated, set free, which really salvation means being set free, liberated. Other people interpret it as walking into life, health. Could be other terms. I think salvation is a very flexible word where God's moving us forward into being our true self, into alignment with God, who God is, walking into our true self. So as I conclude this, full circle, if this sounds sort of narcissistic or selfish, and it can, because it's all about yourself, right? Isn't Christianity about everyone else? I mean, isn't Christianity about helping the world? And so I'm reminded, our last series, we did Religions of the World, and it was powerful. We had a couple guest speakers. Of course, Pastor Ryan was great as always, and we had an imam, Khalil, come in, and we had a rabbi, Rabbi Shmuley, come in and talk to us from a Jewish perspective, and he gave a great analogy that stuck with me. And he said, we move out inspired by God to change the world, right? And as we are moving out and changing the world, it doesn't take long before we become a little overwhelmed, confused, frustrated, unsure. It's just such a big task. And we say, no, if we want to change the world, we need to start in our community. Start natural. We have relationships with people wherever we live. So we begin to venture there. Like, let's change this community. Let's change people. Let's bring people to health. And then you realize as you're doing that you need to take another step further, and it begins with you. You're working on yourself, growing in yourself, changing yourself. Because when you're walking into health, then your community, you will begin to bring health to your community, and you will begin to bring health to the world. If we do it the other way around, oftentimes it can have a tendency to even boost our ego. We're doing great things. Look at us. Look at how great we are. We're changing the world. Whereas natural, if you are transformed and I am transformed into healthier people, it's a natural overflow. And then it doesn't matter who's looking. It's humility and love and not oppression or coercion. It's always persuasive and always gentle. As we are formed in individuals, and what I believe is Jesus is talking about a salvation, that I think will reciprocate and change the world.